Will $50 silver be the new floor for the coming silver boom? Well, that's what some analysts believe will happen. I'm not there yet, but I do believe that we're just getting started with silver's latest rally. Let's talk about it as we explore. I say that somewhat reluctantly, but I am bullish on silver. And for those of you who think otherwise, well, if you look at my track record over the last 4 or 5 years, I've been bullish on silver every single year. I'm just a little bit more muted and a little bit more realistic in my expectations. However, some could make the argument that I'm not, considering that my year-end prognostications have been wrong except for twice, for 2 years. And this is the second year where I have been right about silver. Nonetheless, we're going to see pullbacks. There's no question about that. Silver's price will fall and it will rise as it always does. But the trend is your friend, and we're seeing it right now in the great silver comeback, which is already underway. But I believe it's got more room to move to the upside. My friends at Summit Metals, they know this, and they attract the market as well. They have a YouTube channel. They have some good selection, a growing selection of silver products. So check them out at summitmetals.com and experience the customer service firsthand. Elevate your wealth with Summit Metals. Now, I think what's fascinating is we're seeing this year a little bit less of a deficit than we've seen last year. In other words, in 2024, we saw silver demand exceed total supply by 148 million ounces. This year, the shortfall is forecast to go down to 118 million ounces. Notwithstanding, silver has now reached $37 twice this year, and likely it's going to continue to climb even though they are producing more silver to meet that demand. But again, keep in mind, we are running a deficit 4 years in a row, and we're starting to see this comeback take place here. It's pretty amazing. In fact, this piece that I'm referencing here is from Charlie Garcia, and it gives a little bit of insight as to what's happening with these shortages and what has happened with silver's price performance for quite a long time. We have seen from 1974 to 1980, silver soared 1,363%, nearly doubling gold's 720% gain. So that is pretty intriguing if we look at the past as any measurement of what's going to happen in the future. In the more recent past, from 2001 to 2008, silver surged 414%. Again, outperforming gold's 292% increase. And when we look at 1980, that was obviously skewed by what the Hunt brothers had done. So that is the one skewing element here that we have to take into account and consideration. In any event, from 2001 and 2008, that is a much more, I think, measurable amount that we can look at. In fact, I think that is the best metric to see what could be happening with silver in the coming year or two. But there's another caveat, too, that I'll talk about later in the video. Also later in the video, I'm going to show you a very wild piece of silver that I got some time ago. I'm not sure if I showed this or not. I got this at a coin shop far away from me for right around a spot price, maybe a little bit above it. But this piece of silver has some history about it too. So stay tuned for that. I'll show you that later in the video. Now, from 2006 to 2012, silver gained 321% compared with gold's 167%. But remember, we had the other anomaly because it was during this time that silver reached $50 an ounce. And so that was an anomaly. And in a sense, what we've been seeing here is throughout the history from 1974 until now, each of these periods, silver has far outperformed gold, but at a lesser rate. So in other words, 1,363% to 414% to now 321%. What will it do this time? I think it will have an even more muted outperformance compared to gold. But even as such, I think that still means that we're really just at the beginning of it, considering what's been happening over the past year. and the past couple of years in reality. Silver's outperformance typically follows a predictable pattern: quiet accumulation, skepticism, and then a breakout that catches markets by surprise. And that could happen again. I don't rule that out. However, I think one thing we got to understand and notice is that I would much rather see what is going on now in 2025 with it climbing up relatively slowly, but still outperforming gold at a pace, and such a pace that it may stick this time instead of coming back down again. Recycling, by the way, has barely plugged the gap of the deficits that we've been seeing, the demand exceeding supply. Mine supply, responsible for over 80% of annual silver production, peaked in 2015 at 891 million ounces, but has steadily declined, dropping to 820 million ounces in 2024. That's a contraction of 8%. Now, some say that we're projected to see a 4% rise in demand in mining this year in 2025. And with some resources potentially being found in Poland, that could be a game changer that could occur in the next couple of years. But we'll see. The problem isn't only supply and demand, it's a lack of capital investment in mining itself. More than 70% of silver is mined as a byproduct of copper, gold, zinc, and lead. Industries are seeing as an investment drought. So that is a real problem that could weigh in as to whether or not they're going to go for it. You know, a couple dollars up in silver's price may not be enough for them to do that. And then, of course, we know this ESG situation that's been going on, regulatory red tape and investment firms with a backbone that is really non-existent. Nobody wants to fund mining anymore, which means that silver supply is being throttled, especially as a primary resource. That has fallen precipitously. As we have seen, primary silver miners are very few and far between these days. And gold is essentially something that's very different. It's tucked away in vaults. And we've been seeing that central bankers have been hoarding them like crazy since 2022. And that is the one caveat as to what is going to prevent silver from greatly outperforming gold this time, even though it has, for all intents and purposes, this year and even parts of last year. It's got a tough road to follow with so many central banks hoarding gold. And that's why, but that's the one caveat that's different, I think. Now, in 2016, just over half of silver's global supply went to industry. Today, it's more than 80%, and I disagree with that too. That's not right. It's maybe 55, 56%. Now, the rise in electronics, all things electric and solar panels, has transformed silver from a monetary relic to modern necessity, but it is not 80% from all the data that I've been able to see. But nonetheless, there is a lot of demand for silver out there for industrial applications. Solar is the game changer. Photovoltaic demand has doubled in the past decade, pushing the demand for silver even higher, although some people feel that has peaked in the short term as well. And so this is the silver of circuit boards and green revolutions: indispensable, irreplaceable, and fabulously underpriced. Incremental Silver's influential report that forecast by 2030 solar demand alone could triple from today's levels. Now, I don't know if that's going to be the case or not, but it is quite possible. Even conservative scenarios imply consumption of nearly all available supply slack. Critically, industrial demand is price inelastic. Unlike investors, companies don't stop ordering silver because it hits $30 or even $50 an ounce. They buy what they need when they need at whatever price. And that really is the foundation as to whether or not this is going to stick, this big momentum we're seeing with silver's comeback. And what if the economy takes a big downturn? That means less demand for silver for electronics, for industrial applications. And that is something that we have to think about as a possibility. But there's enough sectors of the economy that are inflation resistant or or recession resistant or recession proof that I think the demand for silver will continue. Military applications, health, applications, medical, science, and some technological innovations and revolutions funded by governments such as AI and other areas that are out that are certainly is going to mean more silver is going to be needed for those things. And then we have what other states are doing in the United States of America that are setting up essentially new recognitions of silver as money, like what Florida did last May. While most investors were busy watching interest rates and pretending to understand Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell's press conference, Florida quietly lit a fuse when Governor Ron DeSantis signed legislation declaring gold and silver coins legal tender and eliminating sales tax on them. The law will take effect just under a year from right now, giving the state time to write out the rules, issue the guidance, and brace for the effects. Markets move on signals, not bureaucratic calendars, and that signal has already been sent. Florida is the first major state economy to re-legitimize precious metals as actual currency. Texas recently followed with a similar law, not collectibles, not commodities, but as actual real money. And other states have done it as well, too, even before Florida, but certainly Florida is one of the most consequential, one of the larger states to be able to do that. And so we're seeing people start to take note and what's happening here. Now, with 2021, with more than 800 million ounces of silver have drained from global inventories, the equivalent of almost 10 months of mine supply, recycled silver, historically a buffer against rising prices, has become notably less responsive. Despite average silver prices increasing 46% over the past 5 years, recycling volume just rose 18%, suggesting exhaustion of easily accessible scrap or that prices may surge higher to accumulate greater recycling. It's got to be economically viable to recycle silver, so that's something that has to think about too. We saw the gold to silver ratio essentially sitting around 90, 50% above its historic average of 60. The last two times the GSR reached these heights, silver soon staged enormous rallies. And simple mean reversion scenarios suggest silver prices would rise by more than 50% just to return to historic norms. I don't think that's going to happen, but if we even cut that in half, it will do very well. If gold moves higher, as many analysts expect, the upside for silver compounds significantly. And so industry insiders are awaiting a spate of mergers, such as we're seeing in the mining sector, that could be occurring. And that's why the author of this piece believes that silver's all-time high of $50 an ounce once hit in 1980 when the Hunt brothers tried to corner the market, and again in 2011 when the world briefly thought then Federal Reserve Chair Ben Bernanke was going to print money until the sun burned out. $50 isn't just within reach. It's starting to look like the floor instead of the ceiling. Now, I'm not going to go that far by any stretch, but one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go very far and show you a really wild-looking piece of silver. This thing has historic significance, and this is a 2012 Silver Eagle that was available less than a year after silver's price reached $50 a troy ounce. Now, if you look at this one, it's got some marks on it, and it is indeed a proof Silver Eagle that I bought for right around bullion price maybe a year or so ago. And this thing is pretty wild because it has some fire damage to it. Yes, this was caught up in a fire, and it saved the coin, but not the plastic and everything around it. And it does have some marks on it and everything like that. Some burn marks, it appears to be right there. But there it is. Fascinating indeed to have a piece of silver like this, a silver American Eagle. And that's one of the most common forms of silver you can buy is Silver Eagles. And pleased to have that in this stack. But nonetheless, there it is. Let me know what your thoughts about silver and where you think it's going to go. I think no matter the price, silver is revolutionary in and of itself for being wealth outside of the system and for being the most versatile metal on the periodic table that just happens to be precious. I'd like to extend a multitude of gratitude to each and every one of you for taking the time to watch this video and encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.